What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I wanted to do a discussion on the true cost of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, I know a lot of players grapple with the decision of maybe purchasing $30, $40, even $50 cards, and that may seem like a lot of money for not a lot of payoff. But today I want to go ahead and try to convince you otherwise as to why you should invest in these high-value cards and what value you receive out of it, but at the same time also realizing that you don't have to spend that much money in order to enjoy the value of these cards themselves. But before we get into that, I want to give a huge shout out to my newest YouTube channel members as always. So big shout outs today to Brony Squad, to Richie, as well as Michelle Inho. You guys are the reason that this channel is growing strong. And if you guys want to help support me in the channel through a YouTube channel membership, go ahead and hit the join button down below or check out the links in the description. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So I'm going to be using myself as an example in this video because where I wanted to start with is these. These are the Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring playset I picked up on the release of Maximum Crisis. Now, for these Ash Blossoms, I probably paid about $200 US in order to obtain those. So if you divide that out, it's about $66 per copy. Now, that seems like a lot of money, and don't get me wrong, it definitely is. But what I want to talk about is why I decided to purchase these cards. So first off, Maximum Crisis was the set that was at the end of the 2016-2017 competitive season, which meant that Maximum Crisis was not going to be printed in the 2017 Megatons. So with that knowledge in mind, I knew that by investing in these Ash Blossoms, there was no way that they were going to get reprinted for any, soon period of time, because there was going to be a point where when we get core sets, they usually don't get reprints until Megaton season comes around. Obviously, there are some exceptions because Ash Blossom has received a couple reprints since then, but typically most cards don't get reprints out of core sets unless the demand is extraordinarily high, and that's exactly what happened with Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. So even though it didn't make it to the Megatons, the first reprint of Ash Blossom was in Legendary Collection Kaiba, I believe back in March, and the second copy was actually just today, as a matter of fact. It is now a super rare in Shadows in Valhalla. Now, even though Ash Blossom has managed to have some reprints, the value of Ash Blossom has managed to stay incredibly high for a few other reasons. Second off, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is one of the most generic cards ever because it doesn't belong to any particular archetype necessarily. It's a hand trap, so that means that you can pretty much play it in any single deck that you're wanting to use it as a hand trap to stop your opponent from going off with their plays. The only exception to this is like maybe a Demise deck, because Demise kind of conflicts with Ash Blossom because you don't want monsters in your hand, otherwise you're just going to be sending them to the graveyard. But in pretty much every other instance, players are going to want to have Ash Blossom at their disposal. And the third and final reason is that Ash Blossom is arguably one of the strongest cards ever printed in this game's history. There is no other card that can stop nearly as many options as a card like Ash Blossom, just in a single card, and for how generic that it is. I mean, think back to when That Grass Looks Greener was legal. I mean, if you didn't have the Ash Blossom for the grass, you probably just lost that game. And there's so many other instances too that I could cite, like Spiral Double Helix back in Spiral format. You've got stuff like Card of Demise, and there might be some maybe very niche options you could use to stop some of these cards, but none were as generic and as flexible as a card like Ash Blossom, and that's why it's managed to retain that value that it has, and I think it's very deserving of that value at the same time. Now, moving on, the thing is, I could go ahead and sell these Ash Blossoms right now for about $40 a piece. That's the current rate that the secret rares from Maximum Crisis are going for, which means I would get $120. So over the course of a year, I spent $200, I'd be getting $120 back, so I had a loss, let's say, of about $80. So realistically, what it comes down to, things are going to depreciate over time because the metas are going to change and evolve. Power creep is natural and inevitable, so it makes sense that a card like this is going to naturally depreciate in value. But what it really comes down to is, what is the value that I put on that $80 loss? And I feel like you can divide this into two separate categories. You have the tangible value and the intangible value. So starting with tangible value, what do I mean by this? Well, by tangible value, I'm specifically talking about, prizing or things that you earned as a result of having these Ash Blossoms in your deck. So, for instance, right when Maximum Crisis came out, there was a case tournament being hosted by one of the shops in town, and I managed to top that event, and I believe I won a single box of Maximum Crisis, and out of that box, I actually think I pulled a Dragonic Diagram as well. So, you can correlate this a couple ways. You can either say that I got a $65 to $70 booster box, or if you want to just take the value of the Dragonic Diagram and just pretty much sell it right then and there, that would be going for about $80 to $90 at the time. So just from that case tournament alone, I was almost able to recoup the value that I basically lost over the course of the year. But that's just one tournament. I use these Ash Blossoms in pretty much every single deck of mine over the course of the year. I don't think I played a Demise deck at all, so yeah, most likely I use Ash Blossom in every single deck I played over the course of the past year. So you have to realize that right after that case tournament, there was a regional that I managed to get my invite at, which allowed me then to go to the North American World Championship qualifier, and Ash Blossom was instrumental in my deck's success there. Beyond that though, there was numerous local tournaments, regionals, YCSs, and even just the 2018 World Championship qualifier that just happened about a month ago. Ash Blossom was instrumental in basically my deck's success over the course of the entire year. I won so many local tournaments that I was able to accrue so much prizing in the term of physical product like booster packs or anything like that, but also even in terms of store credit depending on the store that I went to and how they ran the tournament. So if you added up the value of not only just the product itself, but the cards I pulled from that product, like secret rares like Evenly Matched, Borolo Dragon, Saryuja, all the expensive ultra and secret rares that I was able to either trade for other cards or sell off for cash entirely, also paired with the store credit I received, which is basically money in its own right that I'm going to spend on Yu-Gi-Oh! Anyway, the amount that that would total to far surpasses that $80 loss that I spent by basically having these Ash Blossoms over the course of the year. But I also want to talk about the intangible value as well. And when I'm referring to intangible value, I'm talking about things like things that you can't physically put a value on. Things that are, you know, what's important to you emotionally, mentally, more of a psychological or holistic aspect to looking at things. One of those intangible values that's important to me personally is the feeling of success. I love going in and playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At the most optimal level I can, because then when it comes down to it, when I win a really close game, or when I'm just like dominating people or just doing all these really cool things that my deck is able to do, I know that, you know, it's because I'm playing the most ideal version of my deck. Conversely, if I'm doing poorly or if I made a mistake, it's not because I didn't have specific cards at my disposal, it's because I made the actual mistake and there was nothing wrong with the deck itself. Now, obviously, all these points are debatable, but by playing a deck at its most optimal level, by having these cards at your disposal, you're going to have a heightened sense of success. And obviously you don't need to have Ash Blossom or any of these expensive cards to do well, but by having these cards at your disposal, you're skewing probability in your favor that you're going to do well more often than not, because when those instances come up that there's a card that you can hit with Ash Blossom or any instance like that, you're going to have that card there, or you had at least the chance of having it in your hand for when those situations arise, compared to not having it in your deck at all and just getting absolutely steamrolled. So again, you don't need to have these cards, but by skewing probability in your favor by having them at your disposal, it's going to make you feel better about playing the game overall. And that leads me into my next point, feeling good about the game overall, because what's the most important point about Yu-Gi-Oh? It's to have fun. And you know, we create tons of memories with our friends when we go to these events, when we just play at locals, or even just when we're just having fun on the internet. Yu-Gi-Oh is about having fun. And when you have these cards at your disposal, you're going to have a heightened sense of having more fun, because you're going to be able to do things with your deck that you weren't previously able to do because you now have these cards available to you. Think about if you played any specific deck, but you stripped it of the most expensive cards, you're not playing an ideal or optimized version, and that means you can't equate the success that someone might have had with the deck compared to your build, because it's not the same deck. So by experimenting with that and actually playing with these more high-end expensive cards, you can start to see, oh, this is why this is fun, because I'm able to stop things that I wasn't able to stop before in the case of Ash Blossom, or my deck's able to do things that it might not normally be able to do as a result of having X, Y, or Z card. That's ultimately the point here, is to have fun. And, you know, obviously this is all just pure, you know, theory and how I decide to look at things, but I think when it really comes down to it, when you look at this and extrapolate this for, you know, Ash Blossom or any other expensive card, or even an entire Yu-Gi-Oh deck itself, the thing you have to realize is it really comes down to you. It's what value you decide to derive out of any particular instance, whether it's tangible or intangible, and if you feel that's worth it in the long run. You know, you could just buy these Ash Blossoms at release for $200, and then you could just go to an event, have fun, and sell them, and most likely you're gonna recoup a majority of your investment because the card is still very strong, and a lot of people are going to need it. And hell, you might even be able to make some money off of it too. But for me personally, I knew I was gonna be using these Ash Blossoms for a very long time in a lot of my decks, so I decided to make the investment early, and I saw a lot of success as a result of that. So again, it really boils down to, you know, not only having it within your means and your budget to be able to do this, but also what value you truly derive out of going this route as a whole. Because if you have it within your means to afford some of these more higher end cards, you don't have to keep them permanently. You can just use them for the event, sell them back. You take a bit of a loss, but you got to experience what it was like to play with these stronger cards and have them at your disposal. And for an increased sense of success, for an increased feeling of, you know, joy or pleasure or whatever it may be, if you feel that that's worth it just to take a little bit of a loss for an afternoon or a weekend of fun, then that's absolutely worth it, and it's definitely something you should consider. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about looking through Yu-Gi-Oh! Through this lens and investing in these more higher end cards, but not necessarily having to hang on to them to enjoy the benefits of them existing. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content, and if you found this video informative, consider becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by pledging your support, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.